Hello, welcome to a preview of ALN Thursday at 3 from the halls of the U.S. Senate building for U.S. Senators. This is which one, Jack?
Russell.
This is the Russell Senate Office Building, and we are literally in the halls of Congress. We just met with Jack's Senate staff, Senator
Village.
also Brooks, and Wendy, who did we meet with?
Lilia Osman. She's a legislative correspondent.
And Wendy McCate is here from Australia. And this is just a preview before we actually start ALN Thursday at 3. I'm going to go around to the other side of the camera and ask Jack and Wendy about their day in the week. So, Wendy, what's the one impression of being here, meeting with Senate staff, talking about legislation that could improve asset management in the United States?
I think it's an amazing opportunity after being at the 3-day summit that we've had already this week and having the architect of the Capitol and so many other really good examples of asset management already being done here across the US and Washington. This is just a no-brainer to start bringing it into government and bringing it in for new legislation that they're going to bring out. It just makes perfect sense because they're going to make sure that they get value out of what they're putting across, being able to measure it, quantify it, and it's going to have all those other benefits that will come along with it. So safety, sustainability, environmental outcomes, you name it. So I think there's a lot of really positive selling points there. They sounded very interested when we talked to them today.
The eyes were lighting up a little bit, weren't they?
Yes, they were lighting up.
So, Jack, you set up the meeting, and what were the points that you wanted to make, and how do you think they were received?
The main point I wanted to make, well, first of all, I wanted to find out what they were interested in. Of course, they had the senator, my senator, had introduced a bill that talked about improving accountability for performance of transportation projects, which is very much in the world of asset management. Not the whole thing, but it's a piece of it. So they're clearly aware of asset management. They're taking kind of a small step to help advance that. But I guess my takeaway, well, the main thing I wanted to do is make sure that we offered them our assistance, including assistance too. So if they want to proceed with hearings to try to flesh out this legislation, or if they want to have other ideas that they want to pursue and they want to hold hearings to gather, we have connections to a lot of asset management expertise as the member. Be helpful in this. She seemed very receptive.
She was very receptive to that. And what was also, we've got some great case studies from New South Wales Transport. So being able to connect to organisations such as the Global Forum, World Partners, New South Wales Transport for great case studies of where they've put in transport legislation and what value that can deliver, and linking potentially with executives who've done that actually in practice and what happens. So she's very interested in connecting with our Australian and counterparts, and also we're potentially going to the Australian Embassy tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about how we work through NIBs and with some of the work that's being done in Australian defence as well, and how some of those best practices we can be sharing across between the US and Australia, because that knowledge sharing definitely goes both ways.
Well, that's good to hear. And speaking of coming a ways, you've traveled quite a bit to get here for 3 days of intense presentations that you have summarized very well each day. So now, without any notes, I'm going to ask you to summarize or say what you think are some of the highlights from these days.
Some of the highlights, AI work that is being done.
Talk louder. Talk louder.
Okay, the AI work that is being done is fantastic. Smart buildings are one of the things that really made a difference, or really was a key point for me, was around if people could talk to a building, what would they ask it? Because if it's a smart building, and they would be able to know when things needed change, when's maintenance needed to be done on certain parts, if they've got failures, getting the heads up on that. We also talked a lot about the difference, the importance of being proactive and not reactive, and the cost difference between that as well. And I have to be careful about filming here. So
We're fine with filming because we're filming the hall. They didn't
Okay.
want doors being photographed.
Okay.
So we're okay. A bunch of authorities just came by and we're still good. So
So
don't
we
worry.
also talked a lot about good asset management and the impact that it can have on insurance. So it's a bit like you go for life insurance and they want to know, Jack, what are your pre-existing conditions? What do you be doing? Do you go parachute jumping? Do you do all that kind of thing? So if you have an asset and you've got all the information around it and all the history, what impacts that can essentially save them millions on their insurance. So we had really good discussions on that as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we also, one of the things that stood out to me is,
Louder.
one of the things that stood out to me, and this builds on what Wendy just said, is that there was a lot of talking about not only AI, but also the advances that have been made in, sharing data across the whole life cycle of asset. And I think it was her phrase, of lust to dust. You have the idea, the lust, and then
We want a football stadium.
right. And then, and then you get it and you maintain it, and then it's time to dispose of it. And so it's being able to do that. One of the points that I made to one of the young men who was talking about the program that his company offered to do that, to manage the data project, is that one of the things that I learned about when I was back when I was doing this stuff for a living, was when you start planning the acquisition of an asset in the design phase, design it to maximize the disposal opportunities in a smart way. So, don't build it in something that's going to be contaminate the soil, for example. So think about the disposal situation that you are going to be facing and design it to make that the best outcome that you can have at the end point. And that's what I think about that.
That's so important, because in that design, we call it safety and design. You're essentially, when you're doing that design, you're designing how safe that asset's going to be. You're also designing how maintainable it's going to be. And so, obviously, if you build something that's so hard to maintain, or you need to shut down a whole plant to maintain one valve, it's not very maintainable, is it?
So and when you think along those lines, so there's certain kinds of things that you can design with modularity in mind. So you don't have to replace the whole thing. You just swap out a module or one or more modules. So there are design concepts that can maximize the maintainability and the sustainability of whatever the assets are.
So Wendy, there was a lot of noise when you were talking about some of the things that you really liked. So can I ask you to repeat the section that you were talking about just recently? Oh, never mind, because I forget what that section was.
So one of the things that I found so interesting was getting updated on the work that the DC government's been doing. And I mean, they really have their act together, which is, to me, is very, very impressive. It makes you feel good about the confidence of the people and the chief financial officers.
Yes. And we had been advocating and saying that DC government was great, and for Glenn Lee, the CFO, to come in and say, in 40 years, he'd never seen chief financial office work assets the way that this organization did. It was very reassuring about what we observed. We had third-party endorsement, not third-party, top-party endorsement. So anything that you saw that DC government was doing that resonated as being advanced even to your understanding?
I think what they've done with respect to their dashboards, that was quite good. And I really liked the lady, who was the lady from the schooling system?
Cherie Chenoweth.
And she had a dashboard, and it was very school orientated. I loved how it was almost, it literally was a report card, so you're going to get an A, B, C, D, or a D minus. And that was very easy for people to understand because everybody's familiar with that system, right? And that was another big thing that we've generally talked about. It's a nice segue into, we've talked a lot about the past few days around the importance of consistent communication and clear communication, because just coming here the past few days, trying to understand, even though we all speak English, just those little differences in how we speak and what's important, and being able to just change management as well, but actually, being understanding that some people with AI are a little bit afraid and aren't using AI. So we need to make sure everybody understands asset management and how we can use AI and bring everybody together along that journey. So that was another big piece.
I'm glad you mentioned AI. So having the chief scientist from the General Accountability Office come and talk about that was really, really powerful. And he told me something I never had thought about before, is that when you think about AI needs to be tuned to the specific problem area you want to be dealing with. One size, one AI model doesn't cover everything equally well. So you really need to make sure you have picked a particular AI model that deals effectively with the subject area that you want to deal with.
You also, and this is probably something we're not really thinking about too much as an industry generally, but we can't train AI on AI.
Right.
AI needs to learn from humans, and that ChatGPT or other platforms are learning from those who are using it and getting corrected and growing. But it's only getting that from the people who are actually using it. So this is where we have industry experts. They need to be using it as well. So helping to train AI so it's correct, because people will automatically assume that AI and what comes out of it is correct. But one of the chief scientists also talked about the fact that there's going to be malicious people out there using AI, and use the word data poisoning, and they could be putting in incorrect things. So, our young people will go in and chat GPT, what's asset management, or how do I do an AMP? I'm sure malicious people have bigger fish to fry, but they potentially could lead people down the garden path.
Right.
So this is where, we need to be making, and they're actually developing some really amazing things and standards. And they're talking, he said they were talking about it yesterday in the government around what they're going to do and make sure good things come out of AI. And so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
What about the use of the value and benefits from asset management content to help guide AI?
Wow, that template, it's a very good template. And it's a very structured way to set out what's happened and the value and how it links to the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And that's been showcased over the past 3 days as well. We've had Zara yesterday. She showcased her AI project through that, and that was quite impressive. But that's a standard template we could potentially use on anything. It could be used on AI, but we saw a couple yesterday. So I like the template, because when I talked about consistent language, that value and benefits webinars creates that. And because it's structured in a certain way, people will find it easier to digest and understand it. And so I think for something like AI, it would be very good, because it will take some of that fear out of it, because it's certainty that template provides, and it's really clear. And also, of course, it's going to be accessible on the Asset Management Council website, all the value and benefit webinars. And yeah, thanks to everybody who's been able to do them already. I think if anybody has a good story to tell in asset management, they should use that template, because people from around the world, around Australia, they're all going to be coming in and checking those out.
Well, that's a great way to end this preview. I'm going to come around and I'm going to stop recording, but we're going to remain live, and then we'll prepare for the launch at 3. Welcome to an amazing edition of ALN Thursday at 3. I am sitting in the halls of the Russell Senate Office Building in Washington, D.C. with our special guest, Wendy McPate, Chair of the Asset Management Council, and my co-chair in the United Nations Ethical AI and Digital Tools Task Force as part of the Infrastructure Asset Management Informal Reference Group, and with Jack Kelly, ALN board member who served for 36 years, served this country in the Office of Management and Budget. We just met with the staff of Jack's Senator Angela also Brooks, and I'm gonna talk a little bit with them about that meeting, and then we've got other special guests, Paul Chavin, who started our ALN Insurance Asset Leadership Group, and we have Kimono Numa, who, while we were doing the summit here in the capital of the United States, was in Japan running one of his world famous BIM storms that advanced the AI work that ALN members have done with the Linux Foundation. And the National Institute of Building Sciences expressed interest in working with us to get federal agencies to advance the work that's already been done with our organizations in the US federal government. So holy cow, what a wonderful set of circumstances we have. And now I'm going to get out of the way so you can see the halls of Congress in which we are sitting. So, Wendy, thank you so much for traveling halfway around the world to come visit with us to advance asset management best practices. This is clearly your first visit and meeting with the staff of a U.S. Senator. What was that experience like to you?
Thank you, Mike. On behalf of the Asset Management Council, I would like to say thank you for inviting me. It is my first time in Washington. It's incredibly exciting. I think what's happened this week has completely surpassed what I expected this week. The summit has been fantastic, and then being able to visit some of these amazing locations and buildings and meet with Senator staff, that's mind-blowing from an Australian. So,
and what are you going to do tomorrow?
So tomorrow we're going to the Australian Embassy, and we're potentially going to meet also the Chief Operating Officer there as well. And we're going to be talking about some opportunities about how those success stories from Australia, potentially there's massive opportunity for us to be sharing these across the globe, and also between the US, sharing that knowledge sharing between the US and Australia. So it's absolute pleasure to be here in Washington, and the summit, the 3-day summit that we just finished yesterday was really fantastic. We had some really big hitter guests that, like the Capitol, architect of the Capitol and the director of asset management, and a number of other big names as well, who showcased some amazing asset management work that's been done here as well.
Okay. Before we get to Jack Kelly, I would like to take a moment and provide special thanks to John Shelness, who made a donation to support this effort. Also, Rich Culbertson, a ALN board member, also made a donation to support this, and can't thank you enough. It's so wonderful to get that level of support for these types of efforts. I hope you like what we're doing here in the hall. So now, Jack Kelly, did you have a specific set of information you wanted to share with your Senate staff?
Well, so the first thing, Senator Angela Alsobrooks, has indicated on her website that she's interested in infrastructure issues and environmental issues and a number of issues that basically intersect with asset management.
If you can raise your voice, that would be good. Yell at me, Jack.
I'll yell at you. I'll do the best I can. One of the things that was interesting is the senators actually submitted a bill. I think it's called the Transportation Accountability Act of 2026. And what it does is it requires that the states identify certain projects that are above $10 million that contribute to meeting some of the objectives of their state transportation plans. And so that kind of concept of basically installing or requiring accountability for the performance against these various plans, the objectives of those plans. That's a very asset management centric idea. And so it was clear that the senator and her staff have an appreciation for asset management in some of its aspects. And so we're hoping that they will continue to follow that path and maybe even go further. One of the things that I offered was the Asset Leadership Network has lots of connections to asset management expertise in this country. And of course, Wendy's got tons of connections with asset management expertise in her country. So we can be a very helpful resource if the senator wants to pursue some of these issues that are related to asset management and get witnesses to come and testify at hearings and participate in whatever way we can make a positive contribution. I found that very, very promising. The other thing that I was particularly interested in, and Wendy mentioned this, is that it turns out that the architect of the Capitol is the first federal agency. It's an agency of Congress, not of the executive branch, but it's the first federal agency to have actually achieved certification against ISO 55001. I think that is a huge deal. One of the things that I pointed out, it was interesting, she's been assisted in that by a gentleman named Bob Leach. He currently works for Wolpert.
ALN Senior Fellow.
He's also an ALN Senior Fellow. And Bob was, when we were first getting started with the ALN, we were looking around the federal government for examples of federal agencies that have begun to adopt asset management. And the Army Corps of Engineers, at which Bob was the asset manager, had actually gone down that path and was well along asset management according to ISO 55001. He had actually started down that path before ISO 55001 was published, back when Australia had issued what they call the IIMM, the International Infrastructure Management Manual. And then also when Great Britain passed Public Available Specification 55 on asset management, which was the most direct precedent to ISO 55000. So it turns out that there were, and so what I could find so wonderful is that it's like the circle has been closed. Bob started down the asset management path in his agency, and now he's helped bring about the certification of the first federal agency against the asset management system standard.
That's wonderful. Paul Chabin, thank you for presenting on behalf of the ALN Insurance Asset Leadership Board. How did you feel the event? You were there in person, but now you're at an insurance event spreading the word, I'm sure.
That's correct. Yeah, no, I thought the event was absolutely tremendous. I was very honored to participate, and I was even more honored to meet all of the astute people that were also participating and attending. It was a very enlightening session. I was only there for one day, unfortunately, but it was a very enlightening day. And it just amazes me how um, fascinating what ostensibly is a boring topic of assets and tracking assets and managing assets can be so fascinating and important for organizations to thrive. So it was great to hear lots of different perspectives that I don't normally get to hear, but it's and the reason why that's important to me is I can incorporate a lot of that information into um, some of the efforts and initiatives that I'm involved with, and it'll be very helpful.
Making the link between good asset management and lowering risk and thereby lowering insurance premiums was a really powerful connection to make.
And you had help with Wendy talking about how that's occurring in Australia.
Yes, and particularly with respect to a lot of natural disasters that we have, cyclones, a lot of bushfires and things like that. So investment in proactive resilience for our assets really pays off in the long run. It saves a lot of money as opposed to the cleanup after a natural disaster. So that's there's a lot of findings there from the Insurance Council of Australia. And there's a pretty good report out online that you can access for more detail on that as well.
Excellent. And I've come around over this way because things are going to get a little bit complex now. Because as part of our Global Asset Management Summit, we had a very intense BIM storm in a very short amount of time. Our members have been working with the Linux Foundation members to establish the first knowledge graph database for a piece of infrastructure, in this case, a building. And we presented that work and got the attention of federal agencies who are interested in working with the National Institute of Building Sciences. We've got to explore these discussions. Nothing is, can be stated as definitive, but there's an exploration of extending the work that our members are doing with federal agencies. And as part of the demonstration of how to go about doing this AI work in a way that can rapidly benefit the world, Kimono Numa led a number of initiatives that showed how to expand the work that had already occurred and involve people using GitHub code, openly available code, to develop new innovations. And Alexander Kubik from Verdicity, which is a Linux Foundation Coalition for Smarter Buildings member, was working here in Washington and showed how to extend the work that was done in Portland so that fire officials could receive real-time information on the way to an incident so that they could make determination of where to send their firefighters with less risk. Kimon, I'm going to step aside so we can continue seeing these halls of government. And will you explain a little bit more about what you did and where that's going and what we're going to be showing next week? Because that's one of the things that we're springboarding out of here. There's a lot of things that are springboarding out of here, but next week we're going to show more about the way asset management impacts asset management, especially, not especially facility management, but the unification of facility management and personal property management. Everyone thinks they're separate, but as Wendy was saying, this is a holistic approach. Kimon?
Yeah, thanks. So it was great. First of all, it started less than a week ago, this exercise, but it's been going on for 20 years for us. We've been setting up for this for 20 years. And what's been missing for 20 years is the ability to share information across other teams, which we've been working with the Coalition for Smarter Buildings on this PAE project, which is live data. So less than a week ago, we decided, let's take the work that's already ongoing, open it up, and create a challenge, like you described, for emergency response. And I heard you guys talking before this session about we need to train AI and what to think about, and that's exactly right. If we just ask it a question about the building behind you, it'll give us all kinds of ideas. It kind of can make inferences and ideas, but it's up to us as asset managers to give the data in a format that's machine readable and is good for humans to stop hallucinating and good for AI to stop hallucinating. So just whatever is good for humans is good for AI too. And it's up to us to train that. So what we started less than a week ago was taking the data that we have for the PAE building, the actual data that's been used in the sandbox, opening it up and challenging others in the industry, do something with it relating to emergency response. And we set up some simple parameters where we said the assets in the building have something like a social security number. It's like a social security number. It's called an ID, a GUID. If it has a social security number, I can tell who that person in the background there with a blue jacket is walking down the hall is an ID for me if I have that ID. But if I don't know what it is, it's all anonymous and it'll make stuff up. Person with blue jacket. Uh, so that's essentially what we did. We kept it very, very simple, but we challenged how far can you go? And Alexander was one example of that. I haven't seen the final on that yet, but I've heard a lot of great things. There was another group from the UK that manages a standard called KNX, which we had no idea until last week what it was, but they use the same method of managing those IDs in their system, which means they were able to get the data from the building that we had for PAE, add additional asset attributes to it, pass it back to our team, and we've never met, we've never coordinated before. We had no idea about their standard, but we saw their data in the building within minutes after they opened it up. So that's the speed that this stuff happens at. And the technology is not an issue, like we said, from ISO 55000 and governance standard is so important. And the fact that you're sitting there in this building asking these questions is what we need to challenge every owner with. We need to have the government step to the stage and say, we need to do this because the challenge is no longer the technology. And the great thing about AI is forcing this discussion to the C-suite. This data has been there for years. We've been pounding at it for years, saying this is important to keep track of social security numbers about buildings, GUIDs. The techies and everybody says, yeah, it's a great idea. And we keep talking and showing slides and everything. And that's what this challenge this last week was. Slides are great. The actual applications and the data and seeing it and using it is where it becomes real. It's like I describe it like we can talk about how we ride a bicycle forever, but until we get on the bicycle and ride it, we're not riding the bicycle. We're just talking about the bike. And I think that's what you guys are doing. You're riding the bike there.
Yes, and we should say that Kimon not only worked with someone from the UK, Kimon traveled to Japan. Otherwise, he would have been here in Washington. And so he's presenting from Japan. This is really a global effort. And Wendy embodies that by having traveled halfway around the world to be here. And now I'm going to ask Wendy about the work that Alexander did. Kimon, you didn't see it, but he created a multi-story building. He showed fire in one, and then Victor Esch, who is a fire chief for Bethesda, Maryland, came up and talked about the importance of having this information to make life-saving decisions. Wendy, will you talk a little bit about that aspect of helping first responders?
Yeah, that was a really fantastic way. I couldn't, I don't have words to explain it, but just the way we ended that 3-day summit. So Victor is a fire chief, and he told us the story about at the moment when they get called out to an emergency, they go to a building, they don't know anything about the building. And of course, you're sending first responders into that building. You don't know what you're sending them into. You could be putting them onto a roof that's about to collapse. He has no idea about how safe it is, or where the fire is, where it's traveling to, is it going up floors, what's the structure like, or where there's hotspots and things like that. So he told us that story about, potentially you could minimize losing lives of first responders. And these are people who make a significant contribution to our communities. And so Alexander did a lot of work around pulling that together. I don't have all the details, but it sounded like he burnt some midnight oil doing some programming and actually coming up with something that Victor could use, and came up with a very quick business model as well and very reasonable prices that you could pretty much put this software on an iPad, give it to a fire truck, and they can use that to get visibility of what they're going into and what they're responding to. And even if that was just a little bit of information about that building, that could potentially be a life or death scenario. And if that's not a selling point, I don't know what is, because it was actually, he made it look so easy. He did it very quickly. And yeah,
So what stood out to me was kind of, first of all, I was impressed with how far the state of the art has come conceptually in terms of the kinds of expectations we're starting to have for smart buildings and constructed things, with the ability to query a building or have the building talk to us about the condition of where the fire is, how long it's been going on, how hot it is, if there's smoke problems and issues about that, and also if there's a fire that's been going on a long time, it's likely that, and it's a steel building, it's likely that some of that steel supports are going to have been affected by it.
weakened.
And so to the extent that you can actually, that the building can actually measure those things and report them out, that's a powerful tool. Now, what I don't know is how much of this conceptual capability actually exists. Are there a lot of smart buildings actually out there? Are we using the intelligence that those buildings have? Are they able to share it with us? I just don't know that.
Kimon, you want to answer that?
Oh, he's already put his hand up.
Yeah, there are self-declared smart buildings. There are very few actual smart buildings. I call them dumb a lot of times. Like the building behind you probably knows nothing about what's inside it, and maybe it does, but more or less it doesn't. The other significant point I'd like to make about Alexander, even though I haven't seen the presentation, he didn't only build an app in isolation. He built it on top of what we already had built, which is a big, big difference. And he built functionality that already existed in another app, which means you can build it in any application you want, which is a very important piece, because you hear a lot of marketing pitches and say, we have the greatest app for doing this. And then you go and buy that app and you have to rebuild the data in the background. You're building it on top of a structure that already exists. In fact, we have a very similar app we built last year. We said, use this data and build another app. And you have to be comfortable enough to declare and share that information. Because from the application, the vendor, the technical world, a lot of people build walled gardens and say, we have an app that does it, come to us. And that's where the whole asset management data falls apart, because then you have to say we have another silo connected to another silo. So the significance of this work was through the Linux Foundation C4SBs. We want the same data to appear in any app that gets built, not to extract it and build it again.
I was quite surprised how much information around buildings is already out there already. It's it's not like we're definitely not starting from scratch.
Yeah, it is. It's just in the wrong format. It's in a closed format that can't be shared, and it's very difficult. As an architect, I know this. I know that the data exists because we put the buildings together. It just doesn't make its way over to the life cycle, and that's what's the most important piece. How do you get the information and knowledge? Like Victor said, the structure on that floor above you, when's it going to collapse if there's a fire? If we don't know what the structure is, we're guessing, and we're going into the building to save lives. That might be it.
When we talk about critical assets, in any industry, you're going to look at those critical assets first. And you also mentioned embassies around the world. Somebody said to me, if you had issues, how can you get somebody out of that embassy? So that that's a different way of looking at it from a security point of view. You can say, obviously it's not going to be put in every building and set of units in the world, but putting in an embassy in a high security country or country where there's issues, that could be of great benefit as well. And
that was one of the things we talked to the U.S. Department of State about, because Victoria Hartkey, who is the Director of Planning and Real Estate for overseas buildings operations, sent a person specifically to our AI summit in order to understand what they might be able to do with the National Institute of Building Sciences as a project. And what Wendy just suggested, or let me extrapolate on the suggestion, we could do one of these AI demonstration projects through the National Institute of Building Sciences, possibly, for the Department of State's embassy in Australia. And that way we would be able to combine our expertise with their on-the-ground expertise. And anyone involved in the Department of Defense who's listening, please consider doing a NIBS project on AI at military installations in Australia. So the network is working. We're connecting people, and we couldn't be happier. Wendy, when you go back to Australia, what are going to be what are the highlights you're going to tell your family? Let's look at it that way. Then we'll get to what you're going to tell your board members.
Yes, because I've already been sending my family all sorts of photos of being inside these buildings that I never thought I would be inside for, and talking to senator staff and things like that. That's just, and I'm going to get a personalized tour of the Capitol tomorrow, which is very special. I spoke to Nancy Skinkle, who is the Director of Asset Management, the architect of the Capitol. She put me in contact with someone, so can't express how excited I am to have a personal tour of the Capitol tomorrow. That's pretty exciting. Also meeting the Australian Embassy. In fact, what I'm sharing with my family will probably be the same as what I'm sharing with the board, but there's so much to share. I can't believe how much we've done in 1 week. And I think also from a board perspective, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity to keep collaborating across our countries and organizations through the Asset Leadership Network. I really hope I can come back and visit and see you all again. And I think you all should come and visit us in Australia. We have our annual conference, which is just, it's always amazing. It's always fun. And it's the who's who of asset management always goes to it. It'll be on the East Coast of Australia somewhere next year. And it's always pretty exciting. But so that's one of the things I was, keen to have keynote speakers come to Australia. So if anybody's really interesting and have, Timon, you might want to come and share some of the amazing work you've done in BIM. So that's something that huge value that we'll be bringing back to Australia.
Jack Kelly, you are the one who told me, Mike, you need to pay attention to Peter Kohler and Sally Nugent in Australia because the Australians really got it together.
Yep.
What does Wendy's trip show you about your thoughts on Australian asset management?
I was right.
What did you learn new from Wendy's presentations?
It's not so much what I learned new because I've been in touch with Peter and Sally and over a long period of time, and I follow what's going on in Australia because it's just there's so much. And as for people who listen to what I'm about to say, one of the examples of how that that Australia is way out in front is that Australia has a national infrastructure plan, and 2 of its largest states, Victoria and New South Wales, have state infrastructure plans. And for anybody that knows anything about an infrastructure plan, what you understand is how complex it is to pull something like that together. Because, for example, in the U.S. government, I would be surprised if Australia is not the same. The legal and regulatory underpinning these different is about by sector. So you have committees within Congress. You have committees that specialize in environment. You have committees that specialize in transportation. Committees that specialize in mining and all different kinds of infrastructure sectors, health, education. So to be able to come up to coordinate across all of these sectors, each one of which has its own legal and regulatory framework, not to mention social framework, to be able to coordinate that in a way that allows you to come up with a common plan that cuts across those sectors. That is huge. To me, that's like the pinnacle of asset management. And that's right up there.
Well, that's a good closing statement from Jack Kelly. Wendy, would you like to make a closing statement on your experience this week? It's not the end of your statements because I think we're going to have a lot of conversations about bringing this to the United Nations and around the world, connecting more than just our countries, the whole world.
I think so as well. And I've just been blown away this week. I think it's been very exciting. And thank you, a massive thank you to Mike. He worked so hard behind the scenes to put all this together. And yeah, he connects everybody and everything. And he does such an amazing job. So I can't finish without saying thank you to Mike. But I just wanted to, there was one statement yesterday that I thought would be really good to end on from the perspective of AI. And I think Cameron will appreciate this as well. But it's the winners in this next phase of AI won't be the people the ones who are best with AI. They'll be the ones who build the foundation that AI actually needs, and which is for the people and what we really need. So that's probably my last comment.
I think that is no better way to end this very special edition in the halls of Congress of ALN Thursday at 3, but it's not the end of what we're doing because, as Kimon said earlier, AI is getting everyone's attention about information. Information about what? Assets. And once you have that information, what are you going to do? You're going to manage those assets better. So we are really positioned perfectly to help our organizations and the world through better governance of AI so we can improve the management of our assets. And I couldn't be happier to be involved with so many excellent, wonderful people. And Paul, thank you for coming. Kimon, thanks for working through the night for the AI BIM storm. What was the name of it again?
Cloud BIM storm. Cloud BIM storm.
Okay, live.
And it's going to continue. It's going to continue. This is just the beginning. We don't stop things. We
next Thursday,
keep rolling.
Excellent. Next Thursday at 3, we're going to really roll up our sleeves and get into the connection between the information of the assets and the governance. And that's a wonderful thing that AI is able to help us do. So we're over the moon excited. Thank you for joining us and sharing our excitement. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.